What is going on, shrimp keepers? Good morning, good morning, and good morning. It is a wonderful Wednesday. Happy shrimp day, happy hump day. I am just happy to be here. Let me tell you that. It has been a unbelievably busy season in our lives here at Flip Aquatics. We had Aquashella trade show. We had an import arrive. We've been having some other technical difficulties and a lot of stuff going on. So it is good to finally be back into a good routine of coming and visiting. I'm sorry for the mess over here. It is what it is. I need to get it cleaned up. I think I'm going to move my office soon. I'm pretty positive I want to do it, which is a whole nother story. But yeah, so today we are doing a Q&A. And so I want to get your guys' questions and answer them. And it could be focused in about anything in the shrimp hobby. And so lots of good things going on, though, guys. I know for all you members, I posted an update the other day of the gallery and everything that's going on in there. And that's moving right along. We have a couple other big projects that are going on. We're hiring some more personnel, which is always a good thing. But at least most of the time, it's a good thing. It's always nice to be growing and moving in the right direction. But let me give a shout out to everybody. First person in the house, Will Sure Aquatics. Thank you so much for tuning in. TN Aqua, Hillbilly Moose, Joe's Shrimp Shack, Mystery Snail Guardians, Lawrence Kibler, Caleb's Shrimp and Scales, Dave from Iowa. Good morning to all you. IB Sam. SC Aquatics, Stephen Conroe, good morning. Carrie, Science Gal Aquatics, good morning to you. Vinoksky, I don't know. Tanks, good morning. I'm terrible at pronouncing things. I'm sorry. 503 Aquatics, too coolie for schoolie. That's so funny. Papa Shrimp in the house, Jerry, my buddy. Good morning to you. Biscotti, Nunya, good morning. So good morning to everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is always a great way to kind of start my morning. I guess it's 10 o'clock, so it's not technically starting my morning, but this is a good way to get my day going. And it's always relaxing getting to hang out with you guys. So I did a post in the members only tab on YouTube, letting everyone know that we would be doing a live stream today and what it would be about. And I asked anybody if they had questions. And one of our members that couldn't be here today, Yusuko, asked a question. And so we'll start off with this. She said, if you would like to set up a Caridina tank with active soil, then just like regular fish tank with non-active soil, instantly cycle is possible by transferring sponge filter from cycle tank, etc., or would it take a while to get the tank fully cycled? So just to sum up, at least my understanding of this is a lot of people in the hobby will have multiple fish tanks, and instead of waiting for a tank to cycle, all they'll do is they'll take an old filter and put it into a new tank. And so the one thing she's asking here is if you have a tank without active substrate, can you take that sponge filter and put it into a tank with active substrate, and would it instantly cycle the tank? The short answer is no. There's a different type of bacteria that grows in a low pH versus a high pH. And so in a regular fish tank, I'm assuming without active substrate, your pH is going to be above 7. And so for that reason, you're going to have a different type of bacteria, or a bacteria that's more prone to consuming carbonate hardness, which is KH, in order to convert the ammonia and the nitrate and the nitrates, or ammonia and nitrate into nitrates. And so you technically can't take that bacteria and put it into a low pH tank because that bacteria will not live there. So low pH tanks are actually a lot more difficult to cycle because there isn't like an over-the-counter, like dump it in the tank kind of bacteria that really works super well. And so we use Fritz TurboStart to cycle our tanks, but it only works on Neocaridina and fish tanks because we keep those above 7 for the most part. Anything that we keep below 7 or with a KH of 0, it's a little bit more difficult to get the cycle going. And so we use Fluorobacter 1 by Brightwell, but it's a lot more tedious of a process. It's a lot more time consuming. The good news about active substrate is ammonia and nitrite are a lot less toxic in a low pH. And so if you have a pH below 7, even if you have a raise in ammonia and nitrite, it's not necessarily going to kill everything. And so it gives you time to kind of correct it. But obviously, higher numbers of it will eventually result in death. So that is a great question with a long-winded answer, and hopefully that all makes sense. But long story short is you cannot take a sponge filter that is pre-cycled from a tank that doesn't have active substrate and put it into a tank that has active substrate. I mean, it might work a little bit, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal in any way. Now, you could take an active substrate sponge filter and put it into another active substrate sponge filter or tank, and it will work pretty good. All right, let's see. What happened to the COD Call of Duty streams? Too busy. Glad to see you today. Yeah, like I honestly have not played video games in 2 months, something like that. And it's not because I don't want to play them. It's because it's just a very, very busy season. And so we're getting through it. And hopefully we'll come out better on the other side of it. And honestly, like I want to do live streams playing Call of Duty for the members, just because like it'd just be fun to hang out with members and do something different and then play games with them. But all good plans take time, and it's just taking time. So Will, thanks for tuning in. Let's see what Jack said. Hello, will a ball of moss make my shrimp breed? It won't make your shrimp breed, but it certainly won't hurt it. And so I always say there's 3 things that every shrimp tank needs. It's Indian almond leaves or type of leaf matter. Or actually, we could even say like, yeah, we'll say that. Indian almond leaves or type of leaf matter is really good. Driftwood is really, really good. And then a type of moss is really, really good. But I guess I could reduce that list now and use botanicals are really good for your tank, and live plants are really good for your tank. So having those 2 things help a lot. The reason I always recommend moss is because it gives your shrimp more hiding places, more places to graze, more places to feel comfortable. And then new babies can feed off the organics that are on those leaves. And so it's a really good thing. The other thing is driftwood. Algae grows on driftwood. You're not going to scrub driftwood. That's what makes it phenomenal. Leaves are phenomenal because they break down, provide natural food sources for your shrimp, and also leach tannins into the water, just like driftwood. And so those things definitely make it easier to breed shrimp, but it isn't the go-to, like if you do this, you're going to breed shrimp. So SC Aquatics, Stephen Conrad says, decaf butter pecan and almond milk. Today, we got decaf pumpkin spice and almond milk. And let me just tell you, fall is my favorite season of the year because I love me some pumpkin. And so good guess. And thank you so much for the super chat. I really do appreciate that. But we're drinking some pumpkin spice today. And it's so good. So good. Andy, I just saw this and I want to give a shout out to Andy. Hi, Rob, watching from the UK. Hope you and the family are well. Miss your videos. Andy, thank you so much for tuning in. And we're getting back on a better track. I don't know if I ever told you guys this officially. Probably not, because this happened right before the trade show. We officially have one of our employees that is stepping up as the manager of Flip Aquatics temporarily until we hire somebody. Or if they're just doing a phenomenal job, we might leave them there. But for now, that person is stepping up, which is huge. It takes a whole burden off of my plate because we are short on staff right now. And so that frees us up to hire staff members that we really need and then come back to the manager role. And so it's kind of been able to put that a little bit on pause because we have bigger fires to put out. But it's super nice that it's able to take a little bit of the burden, actually a lot of the burden off of my plate and really allow me to focus in on other things. So shout out to Tyler for stepping up and filling that role temporarily or permanently. And it's just been it's been a huge thing. So that's huge. So we're getting back to the videos, which is going to be really, really nice moving forward. And I even have, I won't even say it. I have plans to do a video this week, but I don't want to spoil. I don't want to say I'm going to do it and not do it. So it's coming. We'll just go there. Let's see. Biscotti Nunya said at Flip Aquatics. So let's say I ended up finding a purple shrimp from my colony. What could I do to make sure that they succeed and produce a line of purple shrimp? I feel like it's a big responsibility. So full transparency, I'm going to make an assumption here. I'm going to make the assumption that it came from a cherry shrimp. Because cherry shrimp are known to produce like a purplish color every now and then. If it is a cherry shrimp, I would say there are a lot of people that have tried to selectively breed that color, and it's just such a weird morph that they haven't been able to produce it consistently. So that's something to know. If it's a Caridina, then there are like purple metallics that are out there. I personally don't have experience with breeding purple metallics, and so I'm not sure like genetically the best way to do it. But I always like taking the first generation and breeding it, and then taking the second generation and bringing it back to the first generation, and then seeing what comes out of there, and then just keep that process going. So like you're taking the first generation and bringing it back to the second generation, breeding it back to first generation, and then you take third generation, breed it back to first generation. And so it's a lot of like hardcore genetic stuff, which is a lot of fun. Whereas like some other people just call, they'll just, take a tank and take out all the shrimp that don't fit the description that they're going for, the type that they're going for, and just let them continuously breed. And eventually they'll have like a pretty dedicated colony to that specific morph. It just takes a little bit longer. So when you're more specific about it and breeding them specifically to one shrimp or two shrimp or so on and so forth, you can control the genetics a little bit better. How do you choose which to call? So for all of you watching that don't know what calling is, it is literally taking out shrimp or fish or anything that is undesirable. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could call an ant colony if you wanted to. But yeah, calling for me with shrimp, I look for deformities first. Deformities are a big one. So you want to call anything that has like, a messed up skirt or a short carapace or things like that. And so that's number one. And then you have to decide whether you want to call for color or you want to call for size. So like a lot of the time that I will call for size. And so I want the biggest shrimp that grew the fastest. I'm interested in those. And then once those get bigger, I'll call for color. And so it's just one of those things. And when you call, a good thing to do is move all the call shrimp to a second tank. And then from there, you can see if you missed one. Like potentially you called one that just didn't have enough time to develop. And then, it could turn into a really beautiful shrimp. And so I always had the theory of taking, your best shrimp, right? Let's say you have two tanks and you rotate back and forth. One is your A grade, right? This is your best of the best. And you call anything that's not the best of the best to your call tank. And then eventually what you'll do is you'll actually take the best from your A tank and put it into a new tank. And then that becomes your new best tank. And your second best tank becomes your call tank. And so you're constantly like switching shrimp back and forth. And then once, your call tank gets too full, you sell it off and then you turn that into your better tank. And that's just an easy way to use two tanks to kind of pass shrimp back and forth and sell shrimp. And it's a lot of fun. And I know Nico Shrimp, who's a big breeder, he actually keeps like 20 adults, I think it is, at all times. So like he has 20 of his best of the best adults and he breeds those. And any baby he sells, like it doesn't matter, he sells it. As soon as one of the 20 adults dies, he keeps one of the best babies to replace it. And he just continuously replaces any that die and only keeps like a breeding group of 20. Now, granted, he might have 2 or 3 tanks of them. So like, 20 per tank, just in case something happens. But he'll sell literally every single one. And then if there's a really, really good baby, he might keep it for another breeding colony, or just in case one of them dies. So it's really cool how they do that. And that way he can really control the genetics, because if you're just kind of letting a colony breed, eventually you're just going to have, like, you know, generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, and you have no idea which one's which and who's breeding with who. If you always have generation 1 breeding with each other, then you know the genetics are going to stay the same until you start introducing, you know, generation 2 into it and stuff like that. And he can even, you know, if he has 3 different tanks, he knows that generation 1 in this tank, generation 1 in this tank, so on and so forth. If he needs to replace one of the 20 in colony 1, he can take it from colony 3. And then you're really not hurting the genetics at all. And so he can really get in and track what he's doing as far as calling and genetics, which, if you really want to be a successful breeder, you really have to get into the science behind it. Let's see. I got behind on the chat and it just flicked me down to the bottom. So I want to go back up and make sure I didn't miss any questions here. Let's see. Okay, found my spot. This is my favorite. Jack, that's a great question. Austin Allen said, "Hey Rob, any experience in any automatic water changes? Is there a video that you can recommend that shows everything?" I mean, so let me give you my experience on automatic water changes. For shrimp, I feel like there should always be somewhat of a manual water change. So like, I could do a video on our system, and really all it is like, you know, you plug in the pump and we already have the water pre-mixed, and then, you know, you go and you do a water change on each rack that you want to do. And the whole process of water changing, I don't know, 100 tanks takes about 45 minutes, if that. And it's just a flow through system. So like, the water comes in the very front of the tank and it drains out the back. And so you're not doing like a complete, you know, 10% water change, but what you are doing is, you know, you might put 10% new water in there, which equates to a 7% water change or something like that. And automated water change systems, it's just complicated for neocaridina or caridina. And the reason being is you need such specific water parameters for caridina. So like any of your crystals, your Taiwan bees. So unless like you have a ready source that has perfect water for caridina, it's going to be impossible to do an automatic water change system. Not impossible. It would just be very, very difficult to do an automatic water change system. The best water change systems that I've seen for shrimp is like in Taiwan. And so what they do is they literally use groundwater. So they'll have a pump or a well, and they'll just pump the water up and squirt it right into the tank. And it's just a constant thing that they really don't even have filtration going. Like they're just constantly like getting water in and out, that they don't really need to worry about ammonia and stuff like that. And the well water usually is a pretty consistent temperature there. And so let's say well water is always 68 degrees year round, or 68 to 72. They know if they just keep doing that consistent water flow through system, that those shrimp are always going to be between 68 and 72. Like it's just roughly how it's going to be. And so they have really cool systems that I would love to replicate. The only thing is like being on tap water, it makes it a little bit more difficult because it has to go through, you know, a carbon filter and a sediment filter and another type of carbon to make sure there's no ammonia in the water. And you want to make sure you're getting out all of the, you know, potential, not bacteria, but like medication that they're treating the water with. Like if they're dosing for an algae bloom, like you want to make sure you get that kind of stuff out. So flow through systems are probably the way that I would go. And I mean, long story short, this is a long-winded answer, but I would say that for the most part, there is no like easy, quick turn way to do automatic water changes for shrimp. It would be a very detailed system. Now, RO is a different thing. So like I've seen automatic top-off systems that equate for evaporation. And that's a lot easier to do because you can literally hook that right up to an RO system. And as soon as one of your float valves drops, it just turns your RO system on and starts putting fresh water in there. So I've seen things like that, and that's not enough to really mess with the parameters of the tank, or not the parameters, the temperature of the tank. So you're really not worried about, the temperature that's coming in, because you're only topping it off. Like you might put in, 1% water or something like that. But it's a great question. And maybe it's something that we'll explore more. I really want to build a greenhouse and really like just mass produce shrimp in a greenhouse. But, that's just going to take some time. And it's definitely a part of the 10-year plan, which is going to be super exciting. Let's see what else we got. James Hand said, 4-year-old tank setup with sand. TDS is 126, KH is 4, or GH is 4, KH is 3, pH is 6.8. Possible to add shrimp. So for me, what I would do, I like to see, GH and KH are pretty low. So I like to see those a little bit higher. So if it was me, I would order salty shrimp GH and KH plus, or shrimp king GH and KH plus, or brightwell GH and KH plus, something that's going to get you more GH and KH. I'd like to see your GH up around like 8 at the minimum. And then your KH, wherever it goes from there, maybe it'd go up to like 6 at the most. And then from there, your TDS would probably be around like 220. And if you did that, then I would say like you're good to add shrimp. And I would stick to Neocaridina, because with the KH, you're gonna want to be around, or you're definitely gonna want to keep Neocaridina. And it's interesting that your pH is 6.8 when your KH is 3, because usually the KH pushes your pH above 7. And so it could be something in your tank that just holds the pH a little bit lower. But adding more KH to your water will only bring your pH up, which will be good if you're gonna keep Neocaridina. Let's see what SC said. You need a few purples in a new tank to let them breed, then call non-purples and repeat. Yep, kind of what we were talking about. Let's see. Does that person have a name? I don't even remember what we were talking about, so you have to let me know. I'm guessing the manager thing, and so maybe that was it, and that was Tyler. But let me know, Papa Shrimp. Tag me again. IB Sam 7 said, tips on moving a colony. We may be relocating out of state, and I'm hoping not to kill all my water friends. So whenever I'm moving shrimp, the best thing to do is save the bacteria that they're used to, and also replicate the water parameters. So depending on how far you're moving, you said you're moving out of state, so I can only assume that it's going to be a tough move. Like there's a very hard, it would be very hard for you to keep the bacteria alive. It's possible, like potentially you could put the sponge filter in a bucket, have a USB air stone, and then, dose the bucket with ammonia to keep the bacteria fed. But that's a lot of work. So like what I personally would do is I would know exactly what your water parameters are. Know your TDS, your GH, your KH, and then I would match those parameters to the best of my ability. If you can, if it's 20-gallon tank, if you can bring 20 gallons of your tap water and then set the new tank up with that tap water, I think that would be a phenomenal idea. Like I said, if you can keep that bacteria alive, that would be good. But if it were me, I would get some breather bags. I would bag up the shrimp in groups of 10 to 20 with as much water as you can fit in the breather bag. And then they're good for like a week in those bags. And that would give you plenty of time to get to your new place, get a tank set up, make sure it's good to go. And then you could drip acclimate the new shrimp and then start the cycle. If you have Neocaridina shrimp, that makes it a little bit easier because you can use turbo start. If not, it makes it a little bit more difficult, and Caridina are a little bit more sensitive when it comes to like brand new setups. But I'm happy to help you through that if you just shoot me a message, and we can work something out. Ollie Taylor, my buddy, said, how is Baby Flip coming along? Baby Flip is doing really good. Amanda is holding up really well. She absolutely loves being pregnant, like a lot, and super cute to see. And she's just the cutest little pregnant woman in the whole entire world. Of course, I'm biased, but I think that's true. And it's just fun. It really is, and I can't wait to meet little Maisie is what we're calling her. Maisie Grace, like Amazing Grace. And so that's her name. I don't know if I told you guys that before, but we're super duper excited. And so that's going on. Still doing well in the egg tumbler. Yep. Still doing well in Miss Amanda, and everything's going well. Thanks for asking, Ollie. Let's see what else we got here. Ever find an albino Neo in a colony of reds? No, I have not. Yeah, I have not found an albino ever, to be honest. I mean, unless like golden bees would count, but those ones I don't think count. But no, never an albino, which is actually really interesting. I'll have to ask my importer if he's ever experienced an albino shrimp. All right, let's see what else we got. Biscotti Nunez said, thanks for the help. No problem at all. You got it. Florence said, is it a girl? Carrie Dina is my vote for her name. That's awesome. It is a girl. It's a little girl, and we're super, super excited. And no, we're sticking with Maisie Grace. I love the name Maisie, and so we're excited. Rusty Shackleford said, do you ever buy from local breeders? Absolutely. Anytime that we have a chance to buy in the United States, USA bred shrimp that we can prove are healthy, I would much rather do that. And so it's just one of those things that most of the time, excuse me, a lot of the breeders can only like sell you 50 or 100 at a time. And we just don't have enough room to dedicate a tank to only 50 shrimp, maybe 100. But like we usually try to order like 200 at a time. And honestly, like if we could do that, every other week, like that would be good. And it just, a lot of breeders aren't set up to do that much volume. But there are a few, and we do use some of them. And if there's more out there, like please feel free to reach out to me because I'm always interested. Always. Let's see what Tian Aqua said. Can I brighten up my orange shrimp that look faded by adding some cherry shrimp to the genes? Ooh, I've never tried it. So I'm not sure, but I would say no. Not that it's not possible, but I would say like if you did that, there would be a lot more selective breeding that would need done. Like you would kind of almost take a step backwards instead of helping the situation. But again, I've never personally done it, so it's an interesting question. But I would say if you were asking my opinion, I would say no, it wouldn't be a good idea because it would create more work than it would help. Papa Shrimp said, well water has totally changed the way I keep my tanks and manage water changes, but I still use a filter for the RO tanks. Absolutely. Well water is phenomenal. Like, especially if it's good well water. The only thing with well water, and this is really important to point out, is well water can also be inconsistent depending on where you live. So like if you live in an area that is notorious for farming, there's a potential that you can get non-lethal pesticide into your water. And so it can soak through the ground. And the pesticide, in turn has very little harm to humans, if at all, but it could wipe out a complete colony. And so you just need to be very, very specific with your well water. And so like if somebody owned 50 acres of land and had a well on it, I would say most likely they're good to go. But if they owned, 1 acre and they were right next to a field, I would say like, I might be a little worried in certain seasons to use that well water unless you had really good filtration on that well line. So that's always a big thing to point out too. And so well water is definitely, I mean, it's coming straight from the ground. Like it's phenomenal. It's going to be pretty consistent all the time. Let's see what else we got going on here. Any other questions that I missed? Here we go. Is green water good for Caridina shrimp? Daniel Hasnan asked this. I heard from some it's good and from others it's bad. What's your experience with green water? So my experience with green water is it's bad. And the reason I say that is because if we have green water in a tank, we are unable to see the shrimp. And when you're importing shrimp and have, 100, 200, 800 shrimp in a tank, not being able to see a death in the tank can actually like get out of control really fast. Like one shrimp left in there, now the ammonia spikes a little bit, and that can turn to 2 shrimp, and then that can turn to 6, and that can turn to 12, and it could just get worse and worse and worse. And so yeah, as far as green water for that reason, I would say not good. Somebody's outside. Somebody's beating on my door. But Caridina, I mean, we have tanks that have had green water for the last like month, 2 months. And then we finally got the green water turned around, and the shrimp are completely fine, and they were breeding the whole time. So not necessarily, I would say, is it a good thing, because I don't think shrimp really eat green water. But I would say it's more bad just for the fact that you're not able to see what's going on in the tank. That would be my only reason. As far as the science behind it, I have no idea whether it's good or bad. Let's see what this says. Jack said, I have a recently set up tank about 3 weeks, and the walls keeps getting this green sort of cloud across the back wall mostly. Do you have any tips on how to stop this or control it? So to me, it sounds like you're getting algae, which honestly isn't a bad thing. I always like seeing, growth inside of an aquarium, whether it's algae, biofilm, something. Like I like seeing like live animals, live things inside of a box of water, to just make sure that the tank is running. Like it's a natural ecosystem. Like there's going to be algae. If you're worried about it, the best thing to do is either reduce feeding or reduce light. So like maybe go a week without lights on and see if that helps, or maybe cut back your feeding to every other day and see if the excess nutrients is causing it. And Lucas Bretz really said it best when we did our Aquashella live stream. He said that algae is Mother Nature's equalizer. So like if something is wrong in your aquarium, algae is going to take place because it's trying to equalize whatever's going on. And so without algae, you would never have an equalizer, and things would just get out of control. And so algae only happens when you're having something that's out of balance. And so the algae is trying to balance it out. So there's something going on in your tank that is causing the algae to grow, whether it's too much nutrients, too much light, lack of CO2, like whatever it is, there's something going on. And so, yeah, it's just a good way to look at it. Like algae is an indicator that something is off. You just need to figure out what that is. And so like light is always my go-to source, and then nutrients is always my second one. And if those two test out, then it could potentially just be like something else. Your tank is just unbalanced, and you got to test like your iron levels and different levels like that, just to kind of see like there might be something specific that is causing it. But really good question. I think we're pretty caught up. So let me go back to the most recent comments. And if I miss any questions, please feel free, chime back in, put another question mark in there, and we'll keep pumping through it. Let's see what Papa Shrimp said. We actually tap into the aquifer that is fed by Rocky Mountain spring water. That's awesome, man. So it's got to be some pretty good water. Fish Ranch said, do you know a good breeder / supplier for Neocaridina ketelang? My colony collapsed and need to find some more stock. So let me actually look that up, because I've never heard of it. I always use common names. Images. Yeah, I honestly don't know, and to be honest, it's given me a lot of different pictures. So if you have a picture of the shrimp that you are specifically looking at, please feel free to send me an email, rob@flipaquatics.com, or store@flipaquatics.com would probably be better. But yeah, I'm happy to try to help you find those. And I'm sure that if I send a picture to my importer, he could probably get me the shrimp, because in Taiwan, they have a ton of shrimp. How often do you clean your filters? So that's actually a really, really good question. It depends. So Neocaridinas we keep in a pond. We keep 800 to 1,000 shrimp in each pond. every time that pond we sell out of, we clean the filter, or at least every other time. And so that's roughly, once every 3 months, we're cleaning those filters. For Caridina, we use Matin filters in the tank. And honestly, we only clean those filters once every 2 years when we reset the tank, or once every year and a half when we reset the tank. But you need to consider that we feed proper amounts. We don't put, a ton of stuff into the tank. The shrimp that we normally have are, 200 juvenile shrimp. And we don't have like excess plant matter and stuff like that. So there's things that we do to make sure that we don't have to clean them. But a really good thing is things like Florinbacter Clean, shrimp Florinbacter Clean by Brightwell, is actually a bacteria that will eat organics out of the water and out of the substrate and stuff like that. Also, I think Fritz sells one. It's called like Monster 360. And all those is like bacteria that is made to eat sludge. And so if you have a Matin filter that's hard to clean, you can use things like Florinbacter Clean, or I think it's Monster 360. Don't quote me on that. Actually, let me just look it up so I'm not giving you guys bad information. Pretty sure that's what it is. Let's see. Concentrated biological conditioner. Is it naturally occurring? Yep. Okay, I was right. Monster 360 is the correct one to use. So Monster 360 Florinbacter Clean, you can dose that into your tank and it will actually eat away at the sludge in your filter, which is a good thing. And so that's one thing you could do. If you just have like a normal sponge filter, honestly, like cleaning it once every 3 months is more than enough. Now that's assuming that you have the proper amount of filtration for the proper size tank. If you have like a little tiny sponge filter in a 125 gallon tank with 1,000 shrimp, obviously that baby's going to get clogged up pretty quick. So this is just making assumptions that you're using the proper size filter in the proper size tank with the right amount of shrimp. Every 3 months is more than enough. But I mean, you really can't do it too often. Like you could clean it every week if you really wanted to, and it necessarily wouldn't hurt anything. But that's when it's always good to have 2 filters in a tank, and maybe you clean this one week and this one the next week, and keep rotating it back and forth. So there's definitely there's 100 ways you could do it. There's no right or wrong way. It's just whatever works best for how much you feed and your maintenance schedule. You got it, Rusty, and please always keep me in mind whenever you need to offload some shrimp. And then we talked about the green water. Let's see what else we got. Sorry for the coughing. I just have a lot of phlegm lately, and especially when I'm drinking coffee and talking. Hillbilly Moose says, I'm a truck driver. I'm out of state most time for days. Is there any tips to help keep my tank while I'm on the road? So the good thing about shrimp is shrimp are one of the hardiest things out there as far as like neglect. And what I mean by that is if you do a shrimp tank right from the beginning, you have the right water, you have the right setup, everything's good. Shrimp can go weeks without being fed. We've had a mono shrimp that we've shipped through the mail and they come back a month later and not a single one died. And so like you really can't underfeed shrimp, but you can definitely overfeed shrimp. So I would say for you, especially if you're on the road, like maybe one of the best things you could do is have like a little custom auto top off system for, just evaporation, and don't even feed while you're gone. And then whenever you get back, then you can go into feeding just normal. Don't overdo it. Like just treat it like a normal feeding. And honestly, those are the only things I would do. Like if I was going out of town for a week, I wouldn't even have anyone feed my shrimp. Like I would just leave them alone for a week and, just have them like, check on the tank every other day and just see like, is there anything off? Is there anything going on? Like lights are on timers, like everything's just naturally happening. And so that's what I would do. Planet Tank says, good morning, Flip. Good morning to you, Planet Tanks. It was awesome to meet you, your wife, your mom, and aunt at Aquashella. Your mom is such a sweetheart. We chatted for a while. She's such a sweetheart. Well, I really appreciate that. my whole family just showed up big for Aquashella. We had my mom, my aunt, my wife, her mom, and her dad all helping at our booth. And it was just a really cool family event that was a lot of fun. And it's always cool to be able to hang out with family. And it's always cool when your family gets to see what you do for a living. And so like we were able to go out to dinner every night and kind of celebrate the hobby and what we do at Flip Aquatics. And it was just really cool for them to see it. And I'm glad other people got to experience my family because I'm biased, but I love my family and I think they're awesome. And it was just really cool. And so like we didn't know my mother-in-law was coming. She surprised us and she's just awesome. So I was so glad to have her there. And my aunt just makes me laugh. She makes me laugh so much. We actually go every Wednesday and see my aunt and my grandma. And so I get to see them tonight. And it's always a really good time. But off topic, but just made me think about it. So thank you so much for that. Critical 87. Can I raise my KH with crushed coral in my filter? So that is actually a really, really good question. I don't really use crushed coral. The only thing I use crushed coral for is for snails, just to make their water harder so that their shells don't deteriorate. But we don't monitor the GH and the KH in their tanks because they're pretty hardy. So using crushed coral for shrimp is a really good question. Before I even look it up, I want to say that crushed coral will raise both your GH and your KH, but that's where I'm not 100% sure. It might only raise your GH or it might only raise your KH. And it might be just your KH. So like that's a really good question. And I honestly have never used it, so I'm not sure. Crushed coral raise GH or KH. Let's see. I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna have to do some more research because there's a lot of reading here, and I don't want to just take the first article and say it. So let me do some research on it, and then we can talk about it next week in the live stream. That's probably the best thing to do. But it will definitely increase the hardness of your water. It's just KH and GH. I'm not sure. I know it's gonna add calcium, which KH is carbonate hardness, so I don't know. Yeah, let me do some research on it and we'll get it figured out. But great question. Really good question. Sizzle Iguana Click said, what mic are you using? This is a Shure mic, an SM7B. And it's a really good mic. This is what we use this is what most people use for live streaming because the volume is just so crisp. And I really got this not for live streaming, for doing video overlays. Like I really wanted to do, and by overlays, I wanted to film a video and then be able to talk in the background after I filmed the video. And the quality of mics I had before, just the audio was just not good. And so that's why I got this one, but highly recommend it. There's my mama. Maybe yawn. My mom, Andrea Lupton, in the house said we had a lot of fun. Thanks for letting us. She's referring to Aquashella and the great time that we had there. Let's see. Daniel Aziri Ismail said, good morning, Flip Aquatics. Saw your video on the setup of a Neo Carradino tank. Question would be, why 2 pipes for the Matten filter instead of 1? Do you have to follow that for smaller tanks? So for smaller tanks, we only use 1. For bigger tanks, we use 2, and the reason being is just to have more flow. So in a 10-gallon, you don't really need more flow. Like one little lift tube is going to do enough. But if you get up to like a 125-gallon or 75-gallon or a 55 or even a 40 breeder, you want a little bit more flow going through there to turn the tank over a little bit quicker. And so that's kind of our thought process on it. The more volume of water, the more lift tubes you would need to turn the water quicker. Carrie, Science Gal Aquatic said, yes, oh my God, your family is wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. We definitely had a great time. So James is chiming in and said, crushed coral raises KH and pH. So there you go. Again, I will definitely do some more research on it and let you guys know next week what I find out. And I could even test our tanks that we use it on just to kind of see what's going on. Whatever raises KH also raises pH. Yep. And KH is really, it stabilizes your pH too. So the more KH you have, the more stable your pH is going to be. I have Neos, and it's amazing buffer for my water. As soon as KH drops, my pH would crash. So I toss in crushed coral. My stuff has been steady for years or so. So there you go. There's a lot of testimonials there. The only thing that I would caution a beginner on is whenever you add something that's going to naturally increase your parameters. So let's say like you use crushed coral, and let's say you used a decent amount. One day your KH might be 10, and the next day your KH might be 12, and then it might go up to 14, and so on and so forth. And if you're not constantly monitoring that or being aware of it, potentially you could have some issues with the parameters being too far in one direction and then shrimp dying because of that. So just always caution people whenever they use like aquascaping rocks or whatever, just know that there is things that could happen that could negatively impact your tank if you're not careful. Now, if you have a normal water change schedule and everything like that, and you keep consistent, then most of the time you're going to do just fine. Daniel, I think, yep, we answered that one. Let's see. Sizzle said, do you know any suppliers that cater to South Africa? I'm struggling to find a lot of species of shrimp locally at the moment. So my importer would be more than happy to ship to you in South America or South Africa. The only thing is you would need an import license, and it's super expensive, especially with freight. So there's definitely a lot going on there. So yeah, if you're willing to really invest into it, I can definitely help you out. Just send me an email. Again, store@flipaquatics.com is probably the best place to send me an email. Twin City Guppy says, does Flip Aquatics do wholesale? Absolutely. Now, it isn't something we really, really push right now because we're so busy with retail. But we do wholesale. And the one thing that we do that most wholesalers don't do, or pretty much any wholesalers don't do, is we quarantine our shrimp. And so you're buying shrimp that are pre-quarantined. And so we guarantee their health. And so, like I know in the past, like I've bought shrimp from places like Seagrass. And then I get them in and they're just riddled with parasites. Like it's just absolutely terrible. Or, I've gotten shrimp from some vendors that are still around, and you get those in and they seem like they're doing great. And then they all die within 30 days. And that's because like those shrimp literally didn't have enough time to be stable in the environment that they were, brought into. And so, by the time you get them, they're just all going to die. Like they're just not healthy enough. And so one thing we do is we make sure that we quarantine our tanks, which are all of our shrimp, which I know you know this, but we hold them for at least 30 days to make sure that they are healthy, make sure that they are stable, so that when you get them, you can sell them to your customers and be successful with it. So one thing that I will always guarantee to my wholesale customers is that if you follow our instructions, you will be successful with shrimp. And our shrimp are definitely more expensive than other people's shrimp, but there's a reason for it. And this is another thing I always say: the most expensive shrimp you can buy is a dead shrimp. And so, if you get 100 Amano shrimp for 50 cents a piece and all of them die, that's more expensive than buying 100 Amano shrimp for $1 a piece and they all live. And so it's just, it all comes back to health. And as far as I know, as far as wholesalers go, we are the only wholesaler that's really quarantining our animals prior to shipping them as far as shrimp go. And so yeah, thanks so much for asking, King. If you got any questions, man, I'm more than happy to set you up with a wholesale account, because I know you opened a store, and huge congratulations to you on that. Why do people say that shrimp are fragile? So in complete transparency, shrimp are extremely easy to keep. The reason people say they're fragile is because people use the same philosophy they use for fish. Is they set up a tank however they want to set up a tank, and then they add shrimp to them. And then obviously those shrimp are not going to do good because that is not the tank that they should be going in. Whereas most fish are pretty hardy to where, like, whatever tank you throw them in, they're going to live. They might not live their full lives, but, for the most part, they're going to do just fine. So shrimp are super easy to keep if you have the right setup and you follow easy maintenance instructions. And if you don't overfeed, like there are like, 10 things that you need to do to be successful. And if you do those, you're going to be super successful. Like we have a Caridina room with roughly 100 tanks and I don't even know, 30,000 shrimp in there. No, not that much. That's an exaggeration. We have 100 tanks, and on average, we keep 200 shrimp per tank, sometimes only 100. So say, what is that? 15,000 shrimp, somewhere around there, 10 to 15,000 shrimp. But anyway, it's besides the point. We have that room set up, and in a normal day, out of, let's say, 15,000 shrimp, we'll have 10 die. And that's like, okay, like, do we need to do anything here? But it's usually like, one death in this tank, another death in that tank. If there's 2 deaths in the tank, then we're like, testing the water, making sure it's good, going back through our notes and making sure nothing happened. And so like, if we're able to do that with 15,000 shrimp, then somebody can set up a 10-gallon tank in their office or at home and, barely ever lose any shrimp whatsoever. And so, yeah, they're not fragile. They just can't fit into just any setup. Like you have to take the time to do a specific setup for those shrimp. Daniel said, thanks, Rob, for answering my question. What kind of flow are you looking at for small tanks? I have a 15-liter tank and an airflow of 4 liters / minute. What's the math calculation that you're able to share as a guidance? Ooh, man. Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. I like seeing a tank turned over 3 times in an hour. So like if you have a 60-gallon tank, like for shrimp, like if you're turning it over 3 times in an hour, a 20-gallon tank, you'd want to turn over 60 gallons. So you'd want a 60-gallon pump. But as far as an air pump, ooh, I don't know. I really don't know. That's a great question that I've never really experimented with. And maybe that's something I should look more into. I just know that I like a steady flow of water. And maybe I do need to experiment a little bit more, like test my water and just see like in a minute how much of the outflow water would fill up a catch cup and just see like what flow I'm constantly running. For man filters, like I just like seeing good surface aeration or surface agitation. Because I always want there to be like there's a air stone in the tank. Like I always want the surface to be like disturbed. And so as long as that's happening, like I would say you're pretty much good with whatever flow you have. So I wouldn't get too wrapped around the flow because I've never even looked into it. And we've been doing shrimp for what? I don't even know now, 10-ish years, a little bit more, a little bit less maybe. Gawain Duncan, I think that's how you say it, Gawain, says at Flip Aquatics, good morning. Well, good morning to you too, Mr. or Mrs. Duncan. I don't even know now. I'm really, putting my foot in my mouth. Mr. or Mrs. Duncan, thank you so much and good morning to you too. Will guppy grass grow if it is glued to rock or driftwood? Yeah, it'll definitely grow. I would say that if it's glued to something, I mean, it might stay there. The biggest thing is like you would just have to trim it because I know guppy grass for me, like it's real easy to separate. So like even if you like brush it with a net, like it could break the stem and it would be off of there. So yeah, I mean, if I was doing guppy grass, I usually try to plane it opposed to glue it. I've never personally glued it, but in theory, it could work. It could. Pumpkin King S550 or S550 said, Rob, anything natural to help with breeding of Caridina? I have one tank that isn't breeding much. So loaded question for sure. What I would ask you is, what are your parameters? And send me a picture of your tank and what's your maintenance schedule and what are you feeding? And then from there, I could be like, yep, you're doing everything right or you're not. Caridina normally just need patience. Honestly, that is the one thing that has always got me to be able to breed shrimp. What really got my business off the ground was royal blue tigers, like orange-eyed royal blue tigers. They helped my business so much. And when I first got them, literally, like, they were just doing their thing, and I never thought they were going to breed. And so, like, literally, I started like neglecting the tank to the point where like the tank probably evaporated like 25%. And then I just looked in there to see how they were doing, because I knew that I neglect them, and I didn't want, like, I was like, oh man, did I kill them all? Are they all dead? And there were babies everywhere. And that is like after I gave up on them. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that, like, patience is king. Absolutely. And so, really, really good question. Chad, oh man, you guys are killing me with the names today. Chetanya Vezrala, that's my best attempt. Thank you so much for becoming a shrimp family member. Really appreciate you joining our little family here at Flip Aquatics, and excited to have you a part of the team. And thank you so much for being a member. It means a lot to me, and it's always cool to see our little family grow. And I'm really excited to get back into a normal schedule. And now that we have some employees stepping up, and potentially some big hires coming our way, it's going to happen. And I'm really excited about it. So, yeah, great questions today, guys. Thank you so much for the super chats and the new member. Really, really do appreciate you guys. It was so fun hanging out, being a part of the live stream. I know Joe from Joe's Shrimp Shack goes live after this, so feel free to go check out his channel. And yeah, I just really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. So much love from me at Flip Aquatics, and we'll definitely catch you on the next one. I'll squeeze one more question in, just one more. Brightwell or Fluval Stratum for Caridina? Full transparency, I'm sponsored by Brightwell, 100%. But if I wasn't sponsored by Brightwell, I would still choose Brightwell substrate. It's a little bit more expensive. It might be a lot more expensive, but in the long run, like, it is a really, really good substrate that we use in every single one of our aquariums. So don't think I'm just saying that because I'm sponsored, but I do want you to know that I am sponsored. If I wasn't sponsored tomorrow, I would still recommend it to you. And it's a great substrate. So that's what I would go with. I prefer the Rio Escuro over the Rio Cafe, just because, like, the few times that I've used the Rio Cafe, I really didn't have the best results with it. But Rio Escuro, I've always had consistent good results with it. So that's what I would go with. So, guys, love you. Thank you so much. Glad people like James Hand were able to make it today. Carrie was able to make it today. And it's just so good to hang out with you guys. So much love from me at Flip Aquatics. And we will catch you on the next live stream that will happen next week. And as always, much love. God bless. And we will catch you guys on the flip side. See you next week, everybody.